So recently I've been looking at a lot of x870 motherboards, and I've been playing around with a setting called PBO Enhancement. I hadn't heard about it before, and I think a lot of people need to be talking about this setting because it's a smart way to get more performance out of your AM5 based CPU without having to worry too much about thermals. So you might have heard about PBO. It's a really nice way to get more performance out of your CPU, and essentially what it does is crank up the voltage and the wattage and try to get you performance within the thermal threshold that you have available. So the great thing about PBO enhancement is that rather than turning it on and just letting the CPU give as much wattage and voltage as possible within a thermal limit, you actually get to go in and set the thermal limit, and the motherboard and the CPU will dynamically adjust the amount of performance that you get within that thermal headroom. So it's a really cool feature, and I have actually already implemented it on both of my AMD based systems at home, and I kind of want to show what it looks like in a motherboard and also provide some quick examples of what you can expect in terms of performance. So I have my CPU test bench set up here, and I'm just going to show you the setting in the BIOS. So why don't you come over here. I'm in the Extreme Tweaker tab in this Asus x870 BIOS, and you can see there's an option for PBO. This is where you're going to go to enable PBO. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. There's a ton of options, and to tell you the truth, for somebody like me who doesn't do a ton of overclocking, this can get kind of confusing, right? So what I want to direct your attention to is this PBO option. This is where you actually change it. It defaults to auto. I'm going to go ahead and click enter, and you can see there's, once again, more options, including eco mode in here. But what I want to do is click enhancement. And once you do that, there's actually a new setting that pops up called thermal limit. So I'm going to go over here. We're going to click into this, and it defaults to level 2, but essentially you get to pick the temperature target of 70°C, 80°C, or 90°C on the package to say, hey, listen, give me as much performance as you can using PBO without exceeding these temperature targets. Like I said, it defaults to level 2, which is 80°C, but you can go in there and change any of these. And like I said earlier, this is nothing new. This actually has existed since the launch of AM5, but it's something that I'm coming to it new with, and I think it's pretty damn interesting. And you might be wondering, is this just exclusive to Asus? And no, it actually isn't. I actually have another test bed. Why don't you come check this out? This is a Gigabyte motherboard. The settings look a little bit different, but I'm in the tweaker tab, and they have a separate setting for PBO enhancement. It defaults to disabled, so I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and we see just a little bit of a different implementation. There are still 3 temperature targets, 90, 80, and 70, but within each one of those there is a level. Now, to be honest, I haven't messed around with this too much, so I don't know exactly what that affects, but I'm going to assume that if you pick a level 5, that it's going to be less aggressive, and if you pick level 1, it's going to be more aggressive, getting you performance depending on these temperature targets. So it's essentially the same kind of thing, but just implemented a little bit differently, and not exclusive just to Asus. So the next question you might be asking is the same one that I asked: how does it affect performance? Well, I do have some numbers that I want to get to, but I want to say that this is just some quick measurements just to kind of show off some examples, but it really is going to depend on your CPU, the cooling solution you have, the motherboard, the case, all that kind of stuff. So kind of use this as a little bit of a guideline, but it really depends on your situation. So don't take this as a one-to-one example. So for this test, I used our open air test bench. If you want to go over all of the specs, you can go down in the description. I'll put it down there. But essentially, I have a 9700X in this Asus x870 crosshair motherboard and a MSI RTX 4090 GPU. So for this testing, I wanted to show a mixture of kind of use case scenarios, and I ran it in a couple different ways. So first up, let's show Cinebench 2024 all-core workload, and this is where PBO is really going to shine. I ran it in 3 different scenarios, one with PBO Auto, which is actually just off, it's not really enabled on this board, PBO On, which is once again going to use as much wattage or thermal headroom to get the maximum amount of performance out of the CPU, and then PBO Enhanced at that level 1 target, so 70°C. And as you can see, the PBO Enhanced number actually slightly outpaced PBO On. And as we like to say around here, bigger bar better, so that is a good thing. But not only that, these numbers are crazy when you actually look at the thermals and the power draw from each of the 3 scenarios. So with PBO on auto, that CPU is just cruising along at a nice chill 49C, which is really respectable, especially for that number. And with PBO on, it almost doubled that number to 81C average. But let's look at that PBO enhanced number, because it was able to turn in a better score with a target of 70C. That is wild. And then when we look at the power draw, with PBO on auto, we pulled 88 watts. PBO on, we're up at 151 watts, but PBO enhanced was pulling down 134 watts. So it was kind of splitting the difference between PBO auto and PBO on in both the temperature range and the power draw range, and turned in a better score while doing it. So that is pretty awesome. But I know you might want to see some more real world scenarios. So let's show off Premiere Pro 25. This was tested with Puget Bench 1.1 extended. This is just the overall score, and I ran it in the same 3 different configurations. And once again, we can see PBO enhanced turn in a slightly better score than PBO on. So we're starting to see a trend here. And the Premiere test in this Puget Bench is a kind of a mixed use case scenario, but it's definitely hammering all those cores where, once again, PBO is going to make a huge difference. But I know what you're saying, Adam. You're showing off really heavy duty content creation workloads. I just use my PC for gaming. Okay, I hear you. So for games, I tested it in 2 different ways. One of them, I intentionally went GPU bound. And for the other one, I intentionally went CPU bound. So first up, let's see the GPU bound result, which is Cyberpunk 2077 at 1440p with the RT Ultra preset and DLSS set to quality. So yes, this is more GPU bound than CPU bound for sure, but this is a little bit more real world scenario. So you might be saying, okay, well, how does it affect that? And we can see the score for PBO on and enhanced are pretty much right there, and turns in a little better average FPS than the PBO off. So you are getting a little bit more performance out of it, even in a GPU bound scenario. But I know you probably want to see a CPU bound scenario. So for that, I loaded up Call of Duty Black Ops 6. I ran it at 1080p with the balance preset, used no upscaling, no RT, and with these settings, even the benchmark itself is reporting more of a CPU bottleneck. So as we can see, once again, the PBO auto setting is turning in the worst score of the 3, but the PBO enhanced option is actually kind of splitting the difference between auto and on. So we're not seeing as much of an uplift as the other scenarios here, but it is actually still pretty commendable depending on this. And you might be wondering, what about the 1% lows? And here's where it kind of confused me a little bit, because PBO auto versus on, you do see a difference in 1% lows, but that PBO enhanced score actually was the same as PBO auto. So it's kind of interesting that the boosting algorithm wasn't able to help the 1% lows as much as it was able to help the frame rates. Once again, that was just a couple scenarios with one CPU, and your results are definitely going to vary, but either way, I think it's something that a lot of people don't know about, that they should be trying out for themselves. If you have some results that you want to put in the comments below, let me know, because I'm very curious to see how this performs in different setups. And the last thing I'd like to mention, which is something I didn't test here, but if you know you are targeting a specific temperature target, then you can go in and control the fans on your cooling solution with that in mind. So you know that if you pick 70C, your CPU is never going to exceed that. So you can go in and do custom fan curves on your cooling solution to allow it to not only be cooler, but be quieter as well. So to wrap it up, PBO enhancement can potentially benefit you in 4 ways. You can aim specifically at a temperature target and know that you're never going to exceed that. 2, because of that, you might be able to use less wattage overall in your CPU. 3, by aiming for that target, you might be able to tune custom fan curves for an overall quieter system. But 4, Doing all of that, you still might get better performance out of your system, which is pretty mind-blowing. And the very last question you might be thinking is, oh, Adam, is this sponsored by AMD? Is this sponsored by one of the motherboard manufacturers? No, it's not. This is legit something that I was playing around with, that I am going to implement in all of my systems going forward, and I think you should try it out too. Once again, let me know what your results are down in the comments, and while you're down there, be sure to subscribe here on PC World for more PC hardware and software goodness. We'll catch you in the next one.